Now, the Royal Commission report, in February last year, I announced that we would hold a Royal Commission to consider South Australia's involvement in the nuclear fuel cycle. Today we're releasing the final report of the Royal Commission, which was completed and delivered to the Governor by the now ex-Royal Commissioner, the Honourable Kevin Scarce, on Friday. As of now, the report is available on a public website, the Your Say website. This morning, the State Cabinet was briefed on the report's contents by Mr Scarce. On behalf of the South Australian Government, I want to thank Mr Scarce for his extraordinary work over the last 15 months. This is a highly detailed report, and I also want to thank everybody who made a contribution to the Commission by participating in public forums, making a submission or giving of expert evidence. In its investigations, the Royal Commission heard from 132 expert witnesses, including 41 international experts, over 37 sitting days. The Commission's tentative findings were released on February the 15th this year and attracted a further 170 direct responses. This report, the most comprehensive of its type ever to be undertaken in this nation, makes 12 key recommendations, the most significant being for us to pursue the establishment of a nuclear fuel and intermediate level waste storage facility here in South Australia. The Royal Commission has found that it is both safe and viable to pursue such a facility. He's also found that there would be extraordinary benefits for South Australia. But the Commissioner has also found that without broad social and specific community consent, such a proposal would not be achievable. So that brings us to the community engagement exercise. A comprehensive community engagement process on the report's findings will be announced very soon. This process will help the Government frame its response to the report to be delivered to the South Australian Parliament by the end of the year. The Royal Commission's final report provides a substantial evidence base for the South Australian community to embark on this discussion. It marks the important point of departure for this conversation. And I want to encourage all South Australians, first, to keep an open mind. Secondly, to appraise themselves of the facts that are contained within the report. And thirdly, for as many of them as possible to participate in this most important debate about South Australia's future. Are there any questions?
Given that you instigated this process, should people now get that impression that this is something this was the outcome you desired and the outcome that you intend to pursue?
Well, the outcome I desired was to engage the community in the most important debate about South Australia's future we're likely to have. And that's what this report gives us the opportunity to do. Too much of controversial public debates quickly descend into a shout from opposing positions. What we wanted to do with this exercise is to embark on a very different public discussion, one which started with a foundation of fact, and that's what the Royal Commission's report gives us. And then we engage in a very deep way with the community, and we'll be saying more about how we propose to do that. But this report...
Will you be advocating for this position now that there's a Royal Commission findings?
What I'll be advocating for is pursuing this matter in the way in which has been outlined by the Royal Commissioner. That is, a deep community engagement process from this point onwards. That's all this report asks us to do at this point. Of course it makes... yes, I have a position that I support that thoroughly. I support that exercise. And one thing that's absolutely central about the way in which these processes have been pursued overseas is that they have to have a foundation of community support, and that's what we're now seeking to engage in.
Does that community support require advocacy?
The first thing it requires is there to be a common understanding of the facts. When there is ignorance, there is fear. When there's fear, there's likely to be strong emotional reactions. What we want to do is to use this foundation of fact that's been created to assist us to move to the next stage.
But is that the only barrier in your mind, public support? Because Kevin Spears is quite clear about both the business plan and also the engineering and practical considerations. He's just uncertain about whether the community supports it. And he effectively says if they do, it should happen. Is that exactly the same as your view?
Well, I mean, I think reducing community support to that level of simplicity, I think, underestimates the intelligence of the South Australian community. There are important ethical, moral, as well as financial considerations that need to be weighed up here. And I think this report is not an expert for closing consideration of those matters. This is an expert report which provides a foundation for those matters to now be considered. And so I think the next exercise is a profound one. I don't see it as simply ticking the community support box for a number of reasons. One is, as the Royal Commissioner indicates, community support falls into two categories: broad support to pursue this, and then very specific support about where such a facility may be located, and very different considerations apply to both. The other thing that he identifies is that community support is not something that is determined at a fixed point in time. It's something that has to be enduring for literally decades, because that is the timeline on which such a facility would need to be constructed and then obviously operated for many decades beyond that. So this is a much more profound decision than the sort of decisions that communities are generally asked to make. It's not just about one side of politics getting the numbers and getting a piece of legislation through the Parliament. It involves, in a very deep sense, the acceptance of this by the community.
The report says that a vote wouldn't be the best way to gauge support. How do you plan to gauge community support?
Well, first, we want to make a judgment, and that's essentially what will happen, is that my government will have to make a judgment about it. And the judgment will be, is the opinion that people started with, has it been sufficiently informed and is it sufficiently mature that we have permission as a government to make a decision?
But how do you
so that's
that without a vote?
it's not amenable to a vote unless you're going to. It's something which is qualitative. It's something that we have to assess, and it is a distinctly political judgment about where we believe this community is. It will have a lot to do with the attitude of opposition parties. And today I had the opportunity to speak with Stephen Marshall before speaking to you today, and it's our intention to maintain a bipartisan position in relation to this matter and to engage in the community discussion in a bipartisan fashion. So ultimately, at the end of the process, part of our judgment will be the attitude of opposition parties, and also testing what we believe is the strength of the community views about these matters.
So, Premier, just to clarify, you yourself haven't personally landed on a position when it comes to our future?
When you look at how the federal government's gone with its plans for a low-level waste dump, does that give you some lessons in community engagement and whether or not the South Australian community is behind this?
I think it gives us some lessons perhaps in how to approach the matter, and the Commonwealth have adopted a very different process from the process that's laid down in this report. And I think the report indicates that should that not be a successful process, that this process could take over, if you like, that particular issue as well. But that's not. It's a matter for the Commonwealth. It's not the process we're engaged in here.
Have you had discussions with the Commonwealth in that regard?
Yes, we have, and they've got their own process, and I respect that process. But we have a parallel process which could assist them, but it is a very distinct one at the moment, and we'll see how their process plays out. But people shouldn't confuse the two exercises.
Do you think a referendum might be valuable both as a measure of public opinion, but also to sort of lock in the arrangements that are going to be needed over multiple generations?
Certainly there's been a discussion about those types of things in the report. We want to be in a position by the end of this year to make a decision about what the next step should be. Now, obviously that's out of sequence with an election timetable. No doubt this will become an issue of controversy at an election, should we make a decision to take a further step in a deeper engagement in the nuclear fuel cycle. But all of those things are yet to be determined. And the timeline that we've set for ourselves, but it's not an immutable one, it will depend on the feedback we receive through our process, is that we'd like to be in a position by the end of the year to give the community some guidance about where the government at least is heading on this issue.
Should you seek a mandate at the state election for this?
Sorry?
Should you seek a mandate for this?
I'm sure this will become an issue of political discussion and controversy at the next state election, if it remains a live issue.
You're pushing back the state budget. Are you concerned it could harm Labor's chances federally?
No, we're more interested in fact, we think that was one of the considerations we had. We think it would be quite beneficial for the state, for the federal Labor government, and we're Labor opposition at the moment. But
so you don't want to help them?
Well, it's more that we wanted clear air for what we think is a very important budget, and we think that it will just be lost in the lead up to a federal election. So we had to weigh those things up. But
Does it also allow you to make some claims for support from both parties?
Oh no, we've done that already. I mean, we've done that already in the lead up to I think the budget will be locked and loaded before the federal election is the result is known. So I don't think it'll help us one way or the other there.
So it sounds like you think it'll be a good news budget and you don't want it to be lost in the
Well, basically.
discussion. So what's such good news about it? It's fine.
You might have to wait. You might have to wait.
Have you found another river of gold there, Premier?
No, I mean, we think it's an intelligent budget. We like to get our message out about the transformation of the South Australian economy. We think it's underway now, and an important part of this whole exercise is confidence, and so we want some clear air to be able to talk about the positive things that are going on in South Australia.
Just on the other recommendations here, in terms of deregulating the industry, essentially, what are you going to do on those?
Yeah, there are. Look, I mean, while there's a lot of focus on the waste repository, there's the report covers a very broad scope. So it looks at mining and the capacity to expand the mining industry, and recommends that we should pursue that. In relation to enrichment and energy, it says they're not viable at the moment, but it says that we should put ourselves in a position to potentially take advantage of those things. But they're not near-term issues. The report, I think, is also useful, and it busts a number of myths about different things. So small fast breeder reactors, thorium as an alternative to uranium. All of those things are possible, but it makes judgments about their viability in the short term. And in a sense, the report is a very conservative report. It's very conservative about current technologies and expected new technologies. It's conservative about costs, and it's conservative about benefits. So in that sense, I think it provides a really solid foundation. But sure, in relation to the expansion of the mining industry, it certainly gives us some ways forward there, and we'll look carefully at those recommendations.
So is there going to be some sort of consultation occur between now and the end of the year when the
Oh yes, and we intend to lay that out in more detail. We're just concluding the final touches to that. Obviously, we've only had a relatively short period of time to have the report, but we expect to say more shortly about what that process will look like.
The report assumes that the state share of GST is going to be similar to present level by 2050. Do you think that that's realistic? Do you think that the state won't have grown its economy by that point?
Well, once again, it's a conservative set of assessments. No, I think that things could be very different over that period. But I think what you'll see all through the report is the Commissioner makes quite conservative estimates about the way in which what the future will look like, having regard to the past. Thank you.